Homeless girl helped starving elder, unaware. The man watching behind was a CEO, single dad, who changed her life forever. There are moments in life that don't announce themselves. They don't come with fanfare or warning. They arrive quietly, like snow falling on a city street, soft and steady, covering everything in a kind of hush that makes you stop and look. This is one of those moments. It happened on a Tuesday morning in late November, on a side street in Chicago, where the wind had a bite to it, and the sky had turned the color of old pewter. The kind of morning where most people keep their heads down and move fast, trying to get from one warm place to another without losing too much of themselves to the cold. Her name was Leah, 23 years old, though she carried herself with the quiet seriousness of someone who had already lived several lifetimes in those few years. She had long blonde hair that the wind kept pulling across her face, and she wore a tan coat that had seen better days, the hem fraying a little at the bottom, the buttons mismatched. She was thin in the way that people get thin when they're not sure where their next meal is coming from. Leah had been sleeping in a shelter on the north side for the past 4 months. Before that, a friend's couch. Before that, a situation she didn't like to talk about. She'd come to Chicago from a small town in Indiana, with a dream in a duffel bag and about $200 to her name, chasing a culinary school scholarship that had fallen through at the last minute due to a paperwork error. She still didn't fully understand. The dream had quietly deflated, but Leah herself had not. Every morning she walked. It was what she did to keep her mind right, to keep the discouragement from settling in too deep. She'd pick up whatever odd work she could find, washing dishes at a diner, helping unload deliveries, babysitting when someone trusted her enough to ask. And every morning before she did anything else, she stopped at a little bakery on Wacker and spent the last bit of change in her pocket on something warm. That Tuesday, she'd bought a single large roll, golden brown, soft, still a little warm from the oven. She was holding it in both hands as she turned down that side street, planning to find a quiet spot to eat it before the day started in earnest. That's when she saw him. He was sitting against the brick wall between a trash can and a rusted drain pipe. An old man, maybe 70, maybe older. His name, though Leah didn't know it yet, was Walter. He had a full white beard, the kind that comes from weeks without a razor. And his clothes were layered in the way of someone who wore everything they owned at once to stay warm. His eyes were open, watching the street with a kind of patience that was almost dignified. Like a man waiting for a bus he wasn't sure was coming anymore. Leah stopped. She looked at the roll in her hands. She looked at Walter. She looked at the roll again. There wasn't a long internal debate. There wasn't some big moment of moral calculation. She just walked over to him, bent down a little so she wasn't towering over him, and held the roll out with both hands. "Here," she said. "Go ahead. I had a big breakfast." She had not had a big breakfast. Walter looked at her for a long moment. His eyes were dark brown and sharp, even in the cold. He reached out slowly and took the roll, cradling it the same careful way she had. "Thank you, young lady," he said. His voice was low and steady, the voice of a man who had once been used to speaking with authority, and hadn't quite forgotten how. "Of course," Leah said. She didn't say anything more than that. She just straightened up, tucked her hands into her pockets, and gave him a small nod, the kind that says, "You don't owe me anything, and I don't expect a thing," and turned to walk on. She didn't see the black SUV parked at the curb behind her. She didn't see the man sitting in the driver's seat, the window half rolled down, watching everything. His name was Marcus Calloway, 44 years old, dark hair, a strong jaw, the kind of face that looked like it had learned to be careful a long time ago. He wore a grey suit and a silk tie, the uniform of someone who had meetings before. Most people had coffee. He was the CEO of a mid-sized logistics company that he had built from the ground up. Over 15 years, And on most mornings, nothing surprised him anymore. But this morning had surprised him. Marcus had pulled over to take a phone call. Something routine, something about a contract in Dallas. He'd been half listening, half watching the street the way you do when your mind is running on two tracks at once. And then he'd seen the girl. He'd watched her stop. He'd watched her look at that roll and look at the old man and make her decision without hesitating. He'd watched her bend down gently, like she was offering something to a person whose dignity still mattered, because it did, and she knew it did. He sat there long after she disappeared around the corner. He had a daughter at home, 12 years old, sweet and curious, growing up in a house full of every advantage. Marcus had worked himself hollow to provide. He thought about her a lot. He thought about the kind of world she was inheriting, and the kind of people he hoped she'd turn into. And in that moment, watching a young woman in a fraying coat giveaway, the only food she had to a stranger in the snow, he felt something shift quietly in his chest. He'd been a single dad for 6 years, since his wife had passed from an illness that had moved faster than any of them had been prepared for. He knew what it was to carry something heavy and keep walking anyway. He recognized it in other people. He remembered the old man's face. He rolled up the window and drove to his next meeting. But he didn't forget. It took him 3 days to find her, not through anything dramatic, just through the city's own network of quiet connections. He'd gone back to that street, asked around at the bakery. The woman behind the counter knew Leah. Sweet girl, she'd said. Comes in every morning when she's got the money. Marcus left his card with the woman and asked her to pass it along, with a note that said simply, I saw what you did. I'd like to talk if you're willing. No strings. Leah sat with that card for a full day before she called. When they met, it was at a coffee shop, neutral ground, her choosing. She was wary. The way anyone who's been on the short end of a few promises learns to be wary. She sat across from him with her coat still on and her hands wrapped around her mug, watching him the way Walter had watched the street. Marcus didn't waste her time. I run a company, he said. We do a lot of work in food distribution and logistics. I've been trying to build out a community kitchen program for 2 years, and I can't find the right person to run it. Someone who understands food. Someone who actually gives a damn about people. He paused. I watched you that morning. You didn't think twice. Leah looked at him for a long moment. I was hungry too, she said quietly. Marcus nodded. I know, he said. That's the part that mattered. She started 3 weeks later. It wasn't a title that came with a corner office or a fancy nameplate. It was a converted warehouse space on the south side, a budget that required creativity and a mandate to feed people with dignity. She worked 12-hour days and loved every minute of it. Walter, as it turned out, was a retired electrician named Walter Greer, who'd lost his apartment after a health crisis 2 years prior. He became one of the first regular volunteers at the kitchen once he got back on his feet. He made coffee every Tuesday morning and called everyone friend. Leah called her mother in Indiana for the first time in almost a year. It was a short call, a little awkward the way those calls can be when too much time has passed. But it was a start. Marcus's daughter visited the kitchen one Saturday. She spent the afternoon helping Leah prep vegetables, asking 100 questions, laughing easily. On the drive home, she was quiet for a while. Then she said, Dad, I want to do something like that. Marcus smiled. Then you will, he said. Some of the most important things in life happen on a side street, in the snow when nobody's watching, or so you think. A young woman gave away her breakfast. An old man received it with grace. A man in a parked car remembered what actually mattered, and the world got just a little warmer. If this story touched something in you, if it brought back a memory, or reminded you of someone you know, or just gave you a quiet moment in a busy day, we'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and tell us what you thought. Share this with someone who could use a little warmth today. And if you haven't already, subscribe and stick around.